Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's video is going to be a garden tour and a look at how the garden is doing. Firstly, let's start over here. This is a guava plant that I planted a couple months ago. The plant is looking green and healthy, and at the bottom of the plant there is actually the first fruit that the guava plant has ever produced. It's just sprouted, so it is quite small, but hopefully in another 1 to 2 months the fruit should be ready to eat. Although in a month we'll be starting winter, so hopefully the plant can survive the cold and make it through. Next to the guava plant, I have placed a garden bed with some mint in it. First I grew mint on the ground, but it was hard to maintain as it grew and sprouted everywhere, not letting the other plants grow. So that's why I kept the mint on a garden bed for better maintenance. This plant over here is a black plum. I really like black plums, so I have a few varieties of them. This plant is 1.5 years old, so it's quite small. I cut off the leaves on top, especially the baby ones, as I want the plant to grow more wider than longer. This over here is a pile of palm tree leaves. Palm tree leaves are really beneficial because when it gets hot, and it does get really hot over here sometimes, this can burn the plants, so the palm leaves can be used to cover the plants. I personally like using natural sources of shade such as palm leaves compared to bags to cover plants, but it all also depends on what is accessible as well. In this garden bed over here, I placed a few ginger plants. I have just started growing ginger, so these plants are around 2 months old. It's going to be winter here soon, so I need to cover the ginger plants with the palm tree leaves. Hopefully we'll get some growth in a couple of months and that the winter won't affect the plants too much. This over here is a few turmeric plants. There's even a flower in one of the plants. This is another plum variety. This plant is around my height, so approximately 1.8 meters. I have just bought this plant and I actually expected there to be fruits on this plant by now, but there isn't. So hopefully by next year we'll be getting some fruit. This is my garden compost that I built over time. This is horse manure and dried leaves, kitchen scraps, and palm leaves mixed in with water. This is actually the garden compost that I plan to use at the end of this year. Right now it is April, so I plan to use it around December of this year. If there is any more compost left after using it, then the rest is going to be used for the year after. This is nectarine over here. It's looking really healthy and green and is thriving due to the current weather. This plant is also around my height. I don't think it will produce any fruit next year, but probably the year after. Like I mentioned with the plum plants, I like the plants to grow more wider than taller, so I've also trimmed some of the leaves on top. This over here is passion fruit. I used to grow passion fruit on a tall wire, but it was hard for me to reach, so I started to grow them between these two poles. Next year around summertime, so between November to December, I believe these plants will start to produce fruit. This is olive. The plant was originally here, so I never planted it. This is around 1.8 meters tall, and I believe in around 2 years, the olive plant will start to produce some olives. These are chrysanthemum flowers. There are a few of these flowers scattered around the garden. These are good to have in the garden as pests are more attracted to these flowers, which will prevent pests from attacking the main plants. These are blackberries, specifically the ones with seeds in them, as they are healthier, especially for kidneys. Hopefully by next year we'll start to see some fruit on them. These are eggplants. The weather has been good, so the plants are healthy and has been producing lots of veggies. These are turkey berries. This plant is pretty tall and healthy and has been producing a lot of these berries. Turkey berries have various health benefits, especially for people with diabetes or to reduce high blood pressure, so I use them in many of my dishes during cooking. These are broad beans. They've been producing a lot, but recently due to the weather changes, the rate of growth has decreased. Over here are some okra plants. This time around, the plants have been really healthy and have been producing a lot due to the good weather. Here is a small curry leaf plant that has been just planted. I have cut a little bit on top. As I mentioned before, I want the plant to grow more wider than longer. This is an orange plant that is also around my height. There have been some small flowers, but none of them grew, so hopefully by next year there will be some fruit. Between the okra and broad beans, there is a papaya plant. Due to the weather, the plant actually never grows. I've tried planting several plants prior, but they only grew to a certain height before winter hit and they never grew afterwards. This year, I really hope the plant can grow, and I plan to put some protective equipment around it to preserve it. This is a jasmine flower plant. It's looking pretty good, even though a few months ago pests have attacked the plant, but it seemed to survive through. I don't use any sort of artificial pest control, so I made this natural one instead by mixing neem oil, water, chili, which can be used to spray all over the plants. This over here is garlic, which I've just placed around 5 days ago. I think it will grow pretty quickly, so by next summer I plan to harvest the garlic. This is another papaya plant. This is pomegranate over here. This plant is taken from another pomegranate plant. It should grow and start to produce fruit in 2 years. This is another area where I keep my compost, which contains horse manure, leaves, and kitchen scraps. Other manure can be utilized when gardening, but horse manure is the one that is most easily accessible for me to use. This is a garden bed that I'm preparing, which I am planning to use when planting potatoes or onions around the end of this year. Over here it's a black mulberry plant which is around 2.2 meters tall. It's looking really healthy and green with big leaves. One of the biggest problems in where I live is when it gets too cold or if it gets too hot, the plants won't grow. This year the weather is looking pretty good, so hopefully the plant can survive through the extreme weather conditions. This is a mango plant which I planted when I was around 1 meter tall, but has now grown to nearly 2 meters tall. I covered the plant with a cloth to protect it from the heat, and hopefully the plant will start to produce fruit soon. Over here is a chicken coop that I built a while ago, and I plan to grow chickens next year. I've not bought any chickens now because I have some smaller plants like this moringa plant over here that I want to grow a little taller before the chickens come, so then the chickens don't damage the plants. Over here is a small banana plant which is growing pretty well. I have made a fence over here so that when I have chickens they won't go outside this area. This is a red banana tree and this is my first time growing one. It's looking nice and healthy, and over here it takes around 15 to 18 months for the plant to sprout because of the plant having to survive and go through the cold weather. This is a little setup that I made to catch mice. I don't use any mice poison to ensure that other animal species do not end up consuming it. This basically works by placing some cheese on top, so when the mice smell the cheese, then it will climb onto the platform and fall into the bucket. This is the bird aviary that I built, and I'm currently growing quails and budgies inside. In the future, I'll make a video on what's inside because if I include it in this video, then the video will become too long. Over here is an apple tree, specifically the red Fiji apples. This time around there were only a few flowers on the tree, but there were no fruits. Although I think there will be some fruits by next year. This is a white guava plant and it's growing really nicely. I only started growing it recently, and pretty much all the plants in this garden have been grown recently as I only started building my garden. Before used to be a small backyard garden, but now I have been expanding and growing more plants. This over here is a garden bed for next year. When I say next year, I mean when winter is over, so around September I'll be using this garden bed, and I plan to grow carrots and cauliflower on this bed. I have done a few garden beds that I have kept for 6 to 7 months before growing any veggies on top. I have dug a few holes around the garden, and after winter I plan to grow some more plants over here. Over here is a peach tree. This year there were a few flowers but there were no fruits, but next year I strongly believe there will be some fruits as it is a big healthy tree. I've cut the stem as the plant was starting to grow longer than wider. This is a cherry plant and it's looking tall and healthy. This over here is a fig plant and it is pretty small and growing at a slow rate. This is another fig plant over here as well. This is a small legume plant. Next to the legume plant is a pineapple and it's been around a year and a half since it was placed, but it still has not grown yet, but let's hope that it will grow soon. This over here is ivy gourd. The ivy gourd plant grew really well before I cut it, which has decreased the rate of growth. These plants grow really well in summer, but winter is next, so hopefully it will withstand the cold. This is pumpkin over here. This plant grew really well. I have already harvested a couple of pumpkins and there are 2 to 3 pumpkins that I'm going to harvest in a couple of days. This is a moringa plant and there are a few flowers, but they do not grow due to the weather. But the leaves grow well, even though it struggles a little during the winter, but after winter finishes it starts to grow well back again. This is a pear tree. It's looking pretty healthy. This plant also produced flowers, but there were no fruits. But next year, let's hope that it does produce some fruit. Over here are some bitter gourds. It has produced lots of these and is looking really healthy this year. Over here is a bitter gourd that is turning slightly yellow. I keep around 2 to 3 of these yellow ones for the seeds. This is jackfruit and it is a meter tall. I think it'll take up to 7 to 8 years for the plant to fully grow due to extreme weather changes. Over here is an almond tree. It's pretty tall and I never grew it, so it must have just grown from a random almond seed. Over here is a bigger almond tree that was also originally here. I have cut the tree to the height of the fence. Like I mentioned, here is where I plan to keep the chickens, which I am going to buy around December of this year. So here is the banana tree, moringa plant, and almond tree, which can also provide some shade to the smaller plants and to the chickens. This is a mandarin tree which has just started to produce fruit. This is also a small tree, but the leaves are looking healthy and green. This is a bigger banana tree which has just produced a lot of fruit for the second time. We have already taken down the first lot of fruit, so this is the second batch. The third batch has just started to grow. Here is another curry leaf plant. Below the curry leaf plants are a few chili and capsicum plants. This is another black plum variety. This has been growing for around 2 years. Here's my fish pond. There are around 18 goldfishes in this pond and they are very big. I have kept some plants in this pond such as lotus which grew really well this year due to the good weather. Over here is spinach which has also been growing really well. This is a lemon tree. There are around 7 to 8 lemons on this plant that I harvested this year. Over here is another banana tree. There is another batch of bananas which should be ready to harvest in around 3 months. This is another moringa tree. This is another banana variety. There was a batch of bananas that was taken down last month, and this is another batch. This is pretty much ready to harvest now. This is a moringa. Over here is a pomegranate plant. The fruits of the plant produces very delicious. There are a lot of fruit this year from this tree. There's usually no bugs on these fruits, but this time around there were some, so now I've been spraying the natural homemade pest control mixture on these fruits. That's it for this video. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and give a like on this video. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.